Hi, welcome to the Latinx Kid Lit Book Festival. And for everyone's fun and safety, please read our anti-harassment policy in the chat box. In this session, we'll dive into the idea of books as teachers, building connection, empathy, and imagination. I'm Rebecca Balcárcel, author of The Other Half of Happy, as well as the upcoming Shine On Loose Baileys. And I'm excited to be here with the award-winning Torrey Maldonado, author of Wet Lane and Tight. Yes, and I have to plug this. He's also written a short story that'll be out in 2023, part of an anthology called Bridges and Islands, 20 Stories from Multiracial and Multicultural Authors. It's going to be cool, and I know because I am co-editing this anthology, and I can't wait for everyone to be able to read Torrey's story in that book. So, okay, books as teachers. It's going to be really fun because both Torrey and I are teachers and authors. So welcome, Torrey.
Hey, what's up,
Hey.
everybody? Thank you, Rebecca, for having me.
It's great to be with you. When I was reading What Lane, I had this instinct. I really wanted to share it with other mixed kids like me and you. But I also wanted to share it with like every kid. And I think because I was drawn to this idea of its potential to teach. So first question, do you see that book as a kind of teacher?
My books are what I call Yin Yang Books because they're specifically for the makeup of the main characters. However, they also connect, as you said, to many different readers. And I see this. Just recently, someone Facebook messaged me and said, did you see Colin in Black and White about Colin Kaepernick on Netflix? And I said, how come? And they said, whoever made that had to have read What Lane, because there are scenes in that are straight from your book. And so Colin Kaepernick is mixed. He's half Black and he's half white, like the main character Stefan of my book, What Lane. And so yeah, it definitely appeals to mixed kids. However, the yang of it is I did this face-off with Columbus, Ohio fifth graders, and they're all fifth grade white kids. And they were fanatics about the book. It turns out that we had this game show contest to see who knew more about the book, them or me. And they knew more than me. And I'm the author.
That is great. So you had kids of all kinds responding to the book and feeling like they learned something from the main character's experience, regardless of their own like ethnicity and background.
Definitely.
Yeah.
One of the things that they learned was lots of different slang, and also inside the book, some of the jokes and disses. Teachers telling me that kids are walking around quoting what I wrote. So good thing is the book is encouraging great behavior, and at the same time, it's a weapon of mass instruction, and it's also something else.
Yeah, giving them some ideas of all kinds. Well, when you were a kid, did you read, like, did you find that books were teachers to you in some way?
Yeah,
Yeah.
sometimes books could be teachers and lessons. And when I was growing up, books failed me. I grew up in Red Hook housing projects, the same housing projects that Carmelo Anthony is from. Carmelo Anthony's family and my family, we knew each other. His older brother and I went to daycare with each other. We went to elementary, then we went to middle school with each other. And for those of you who don't know Carmelo Anthony is the NBA superstar, Carmelo Anthony. And what happened was I thought books were failing me in my school because of their whiteness and their demonization of people who looked like me and my family and my neighborhood. And it turns out that the books were failing generations before me. Tons of people in my community felt let down by books. So, were books in my upbringing a teacher? Yeah, they taught me what not to do.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah, or that you don't belong or something. Like they were teaching that this universe is not for you or something. Mhm.
yeah, and then so what that did was it pushed me to something that not too many people are into, comic books.
Comic books.
And when I was reading comic books, it had this kaleidoscopic, colorful, diverse world of action, and that was a lifeline. I had a few other lifelines that hooked me to books. Yet comics really made me make a secret agreement with myself that if I ever get old enough, I would write books that had all of the magical formulas that are found in comics. So I'm really happy because
Ah,
this librarian, she read What Lane and then she gave it to her son who only reads comics. And as soon as he was done, he said, "Ma, this book needs to be a graphic novel." So
that is high praise. That's
high
the
praise.
highest praise. Well, in the comics or maybe anywhere else, did you find a particular main character that spoke to you, or did you feel like none of them represented anything you would be or want to be?
Yeah. When I was grown, whenever I do an author visit, one of the things I ask young people and I ask everybody, and everyone raises their hand from young to older. I
Mhm.
ask, raise your hand if you ever read a book where you didn't see someone like you. And so many hands go up. And I say, raise your hand if you read a book and maybe there was just one person who kind of looked like you, or there was just one black person, or there's one person of color, right? One Latino, like, and so all the hands go up. And then I ask, raise your hand if the way all the characters sounded didn't sound true to life. It didn't sound authentic. The
Mm,
language and also the dynamics and the setting. And
yeah.
so many hands go up. So for me, I didn't see myself in books. I didn't see myself on the page. And a lot of times I didn't even see myself in comics because let's go through this real quick, right? I asked one of my classes the other day, I said, uh, what do these heroes have in common? Peter Parker, Spider Man. The Flash, Barry Allen. Superman, Clark Kent. But Bruce Wayne, Batman. And all the kids looked at me and said, duh, they're all white. They're all white men. And I said, yeah. I said, what about Wonder Woman? I started naming other heroes, and they were like, white, 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 white. So when I was a young person, um, and I used to love to draw for my grandmother, and I used to draw white superheroes. That's who
Ah,
I wanted to be. And it was my uncle. My uncle was kind of like Arsenio Hall. Arsenio Hall used to go, things that make you go, hmm. He used to ask me things that made me go, hmm. My
hmm.
uncle, one day, he was looking at this drawing that I had of all these white superheroes. He said, you know what this is missing? I said, what? And he said, a superhero that looks like you. And click, he flicked the switch. And that's when I started to draw superheroes that look like my abuela, that look like
Mm,
my mother, that look like him, that look like me, that look like my community. And that, an object in motion stays in motion. And that turned into my writing stories where we're centered and where we see
mhm.
our peoples reflected.
Wow, that is powerful, and I have a similar experience that, as a mixed race person, I think Lucy and Ricky Ricardo were Lucille Ball and Ricky were that was the only marriage on television that showed a Latino man and a white woman, which is my parents. And I I didn't really those shows came actually out before I was um, born. But in the time from then to through my childhood, I mean, I never saw another couple like that. And in books, I didn't see families like mine. I just kind of thought, I think I thought that when I read, I was white or
Mhm.
something. Like, because all the books I read had white main characters, and I loved them. They were my friends. But it didn't occur to me. I guess I needed an uncle. I needed an Arsenio Hall uncle
You know,
to point it out to me.
and
I think I was in my 20s before I truly realized.
yeah, you know, it's a miracle that you became a writer and that I became a writer.
Yeah, it is.
Considering our experiences, I often say that when we don't hook all kids to books, we kill generations of writers.
Mm, wow. Yes, because you just don't imagine yourself there. You don't see the model for a, a writer of color or characters of color, and so it's just not a possibility. When I finally read House on Mango Street, which for so many folks, that was the first time they saw themselves. Um, it was just a revelation. My mind was blown. And I had been writing all these very safe poems that looked kind of Northern European and stories. And I, gosh, it just hit me. Oh my goodness. I could write about my abuela. Yeah, my whole life became suddenly open as a possible
Similar
topic.
story. Yeah, I have a similar story with when I graduated college. Uh, College hadn't even given me the confidence to feel my voice belonged in the writing canon. So I
Ah,
was still writing white.
mhm.
And when I got home to Red Hook Projects, I remember my mom. My mom, she gave me a book and she said, I heard about this guy and I think you might want to check it out. He looks like he could be, you know, one of our cousins. And it was Juno Diaz's Drown.
Mhm.
And I read that book and it taught me that there was a place for different vernaculars, for my
Mhm.
vernacular, for the vibes and the dynamics of my neighborhood. So
Wow.
yeah,
Yeah.
thank goodness for people like you and other writers who write despite you know us being taught to write white.
Yeah. Yeah. And when you mentioned vernacular, that reminds me that one of the things I learned from reading your books is some language that I am not familiar with because it's outside of my little world. Um, so, SOS or even lit, which I do know, but I don't use it the way I'm supposed to.
Yeah,
Like, it's not natural for me. But your main character is so interesting, and I'm thinking of what Lane again, that he feels black for a minute, and then he feels uh, more Latino. But then sometimes it's neither of those categories really fit because the projects become more the identifier. Um, because he's with Black or Latino kids who don't feel they relate to him because of him being from the projects. And I loved his language. And like you said, the vernacular, like how he expresses himself. And I'm reading these words that I'm thinking, has this word been in a book before? Yay. I hope it. I love to
yeah.
see that. But
I
it seems like,
remember going to
yeah.
St. Louis, and I went to St. Louis for my first book, Secret Saturdays. And I'm talking to a high school packed auditorium of high schoolers. And the book is a middle school book. So I'm always shocked that I write for all my books follow sixth grade main characters. And I'm
Okay.
shocked when Secret Saturdays got the ALA quick pick for young adults, that high schoolers love Secret Saturdays as well. And then same with Tight. Tight, I wrote Tight. I said, this is going to be just for sixth graders. It turns out that fifth graders love Tight. I went to this one school and the young people were put me on the mock Newberry list. and they said, you should win the Newbery. And I was like, yo, what is a Newbery? I didn't even know what a Newbery was. And these fifth graders knew what a Newbery was. And then the same thing, sixth grade characters in what lane? And then it turns out that School Library Journal says that around the country, young people love the book in the fourth grade and in the fifth grade and also the middle school years. So that's pretty cool, you know.
That is. And do you think the language is part of what they're loving
Yeah,
about the
when I was
book?
in St. Louis, what happened was um, one of the young persons raises their hand and says, I really like how the boys were jonesing on each other. And I said, jonesing? What's jonesing? And they said, jonesing, like how what the boys do in the book, how one boy jokes about the other boy, and they like are joking about their sneakers and joking about their ears. And I said, dissing? I said, in Brooklyn, we call it dissing. In New York, we call it dissing. And they're like, yeah, dissing. So what I find is that the dynamics are so, young people find them to be so relatable and so
Mhm.
real that young people, even if the language barrier is there, like the slang is New York specific, young
Yeah.
people get what's going on. So I go to places and young people teach me slang that is is the geographic to specific to where they're located. But I also find that the language, there's a lot of language that's overlapping, and the
Mhm.
kids love it, and the teachers, the kids love it, and
Yeah.
the kids are learning some new slang. The teachers feel like they're getting windows into young people's worlds and into their mindsets through the language. I went to Hudson, New York, and there was now Hudson. By the way, I'm in Brooklyn, right? Hudson is upstate, it's far away. I went to Hudson, New York, and there was a teacher who had a word wall, and she had
Ah.
slang words from my book up, and she said, "This is you," and I said, "Oh my God!" Like slang words I put in the book are here. And she was like, yeah, because the kids, they knew some of them, but some of the words they didn't know. So the kids were, so by the way, for everybody who's listening, a fun activity for you is to go through the book and see what slang
Yeah.
matches your slang and what slang is different. And so that you could, speak other people's slang, speak other people's languages.
Mhm. Oh, I love it. Yeah, that was one of the fun things for me too. Um, I was thinking how books are so often builders of empathy, like empathy engines or
Mhm.
something. Because before you know it, you pick up a book and pretty soon you're just rooting for that character, even if they're from a different world than you. But because you're seeing the world now through their eyes, through the lens of the character, and that's so magical. How do you do that as an author? How do you do that trick of making the reader become the character, or making how does the reader like make that leap into the world of the character?
Yeah, I feel it circles back to the word that you used. You used the word empathy.
Mhm.
You know, I love that across the country, certain words are getting spotlighted. For example, empathy,
Yeah.
equity, right? However, what I'm finding interacting with schools from across the country, there are a lot of adults that don't even understand what these terms mean. And when you ask young people what these terms mean, if a young person understands what these terms mean, I
Uh,
applaud them. Empathy, though, let's break it down. Empathy means when you can relate to someone else or to another group. Empathy
yeah.
means when you can identify with another group. It means when you can connect with another group or another person, right? And you can understand them. And I got this really nice email from a high school student who read Tight. And the student said, how did you write about a real boy? And also, this is my life. And here is a kid who is from another state who I've never met, and they feel that the book is reflecting their reality. And that goes back
Yeah.
to what you said about empathy. If you're going to write something that you want kids to feel, when you have to, for me, I have to write what's real. And so real equals relatability. And
Mhm.
so a lot of young people tell me, and I feel really honored that they feel the situations in the book are real dynamics that they go through in school. They go through these dynamics with their family, I put media references into the book that kids can connect with,
Yeah.
and also dynamics that are happening, in their neighborhood. They
Mhm.
understand this stuff.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they really do. I was, scared for the main character at one point, Stefan, I, thinking, "Oh no, don't do that, don't do that," And I'm so invested in him and worried about him and hopeful too for him. Um, but I had to close the book for a second and take a breath, like, okay, it's okay, I'm I'm safe. But I'm so in the
That's
book,
the
and
thing.
like,
That's
there's
the
a
dulce.
movie.
That's the candy that authors
Yeah,
eat up. That's the candy that I
yeah.
eat up when someone says they were feeling for the characters so intensely that they had to stop. You know,
Yeah.
um, that's another thing though. When you were saying like, how do we make the books
Mm,
empathy, like stealth empathy builders?
mhm,
How do we get kids to connect? Oftentimes, if something is thrilling, then kids feel it. And sometimes I will meet a student group and I'll read a scene to the young people, and I'll stop at a spot and I'll say, okay, so who wants to know what happens next? And when the whole room just shakes with young people saying, read, keep reading, keep reading, keep reading, that's when I know, okay, all right, you connect to this, you relate to this, and you
yeah.
feel the way you feel. It's funny that you said you feel certain ways about certain characters, because I had a librarian tell me that she said that she wants to punch Chad from
Oh,
What
yes.
Lane in the throat. This is a librarian. Librarian is just like, listen, I know I'm not supposed to say this because I'm an educator. She
Oh,
said, but Chad, I just wanted to grab him because of the things that he does in that book. So that's when I felt, okay, I got it right.
yes, you really did. Yeah, it's so alive in our minds as we're reading. It's and this panel is mentions the word imagination too, and I can see how when students pick up a book, their imagination is already starting. And you mentioned, like, through language, through being real, like writing what real situations, that those are ways that you can help get that imagination started going. Um, is that what you hope? Do you hope their imagination will start doing something special when they start reading that first page?
Yeah, well, I want to share a quote from somebody
Okay.
who's not that famous, and he has the same haircut as me, Albert Einstein. Okay, so Albert Einstein, right? He's super famous and he doesn't have my haircut. However, he has the bomb quote. He said that imagination is more important than knowledge.
Ah,
And, you know, um, my hope is that a young person's imagination is sparked when they read any of what I write. And I want their imagination to be sparked to the point where they feel, I can do this. I can do what you do. Now, there's some authors who have egos, and when you tell that author, I can do what you do, the author reacts like, you can't do what I do. There's levels to this, and there's mastery, and you need to, no. I want a young person to feel so, yes, I can do what you do,
yeah.
because I was that young person. I remember I didn't I remember when I read certain things that inspired me. For example, when I read Junot Diaz's Drown,
Mhm,
and I felt I could write this. I could write a story like this. When I read P.D. Thomas's Down These Mean Streets, and
mhm.
I felt I could write a story like this. You know what? Thank goodness that I was foolish enough to have my imagination sparked, because I was foolish enough to try it. And look where that experiment got me. Right?
Yeah,
So
right.
hopefully, my writing and other people's writings can always spark the imagination to where young people say, I could do that. Yes, come on, come do it, because it's your voice that we're missing on the bookshelves and in the world of media.
Hmm. Exactly. Whether it's a TV production or a screenplay or a comic book or a short story, a poem, but bring your voice. Yeah, be inspired.
Definitely. And when we think about teachers, right? Here's the question that I want to ask everybody, right? And I want to ask you, and I want everybody to think about this. Which teachers did we like the most? Did we like the teachers that were all facts and full of knowledge?
Mhm.
Or did we like the teachers who made us feel? And we had these unforgettable moments that will live on in our minds forever or for a long time. And so that's my goal as a teacher. When I step into the classroom, my goal is you're not going to forget this moment for a long time or for a lifetime. And it's the same goal that I have when I sit down and I write. You are going to feel this, and you're not going to forget this for a long time or for a lifetime. And you probably are going to imagine how the scenario would have played out differently. Like all my books are left on cliffhangers,
Mhm.
and it gets worse. Here's where the story gets worse. I'm going to let everybody know that if you hate cliffhanger books, you might not want to read my books, because I wrote Secret Saturdays with such a hard cliffhanger. That's my first book. That when I visited schools, young people were mad at me. They were like, "Why did you end the book like that?" And so I thought to myself, okay, do you want more? You want more writing from me? And the kids are like, yeah, you need to write a Secret Sundays. And I said, okay, that means we're hooking young people
Mhm.
to reading, right? We're activating the imagination and the desire for books. Okay. So the second book, I was like, I'm gonna make an even stronger cliffhanger. And I did that, right? Went to schools, met young people. They were so upset. Why'd you do that? I wanted to know how the conversation was going to continue between Brian and Mike. And then the same thing with What Lane. I tried to make the cliffhanger even stronger to get that same reaction. And the reaction has been crazy cool, where young people are like, that's not right. You shouldn't have ended the book like that. The reason why those cliffhangers are so precious is because then I encourage young people. Oh, and I encourage educators. You like Secret Saturdays, but you wanted to know how it continues. Encourage your young people. Young people, try to write how that conversation will go. Write the next part, because that builds their writing, right? It builds our writing, and it adds more stories to the world, because one young person's take on how Secret Saturday should continue is going to be different from another person's take on it. So we're going to have all these stories out in the world. So, my books are intentionally left on cliffhangers because they're encouraging people to go ahead and write that story that you feel needs to be told,
Yeah.
because that's the story that's missing in our canon.
Yeah. Wow. So now I'm on a cliffhanger about what you're working on for the next. Are you working on a new book?
Yeah, I gotta unlearn how to curb my enthusiasm, like that show, Curb My Enthusiasm, because I have relatives since I was a little boy with an afro. They would tell me, you talk too much. So I don't want to give too much
Okay.
away about what I'm doing, but I can tell you that I have another middle grade book. Fans of my 3 books
Mm-hmm.
are going to find that what I tried to do was I tried to take all of the different elements that are in the different books and put that into this book, but also add some other things that are definitely guaranteed to excite. So I have a middle grade book coming
Ooh.
out, and I also have 2 picture books that are on the way too.
Oh, oh, that's so exciting.
And something that
Wow.
got me really, really excited is that I'm going to be part of an anthology in 2023 called Bridges and Islands.
Yay.
Woo! Yeah.
I am excited about that one. And
Mhm. And
uh,
and also I'm coming out in other anthologies too.
okay, oh, good. Okay, so fans can find you lots of places. Uh, this makes me want to segue into some questions from kids because they had some questions about writing itself.
Let's go.
So yeah, let's hear from Amaya, who's in ninth grade, and she lives in New York.
Do you have any tips for revision?
Oh, do
Any
you
tips
have?
for revision? Yeah, I'll tell you. Um, there's an author, her name is E.R. Frank. And E.R. Frank gave me this tip. And now I'll share this tip with you. When revising, read out loud. Because when you read out loud, you hear how the characters are supposed to sound naturally. And I tried it out, and it really is a superpower because whenever I've read out loud,
Yeah.
I've realized, oh, this shouldn't be there, or oh, this is missing.
Oh, I love that. I do the same thing. I'm listening for the flow, for redundancy, clunkiness, and wordiness, but especially voice. Like, are these characters talking the way that feels natural, like you're saying? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that's a great tip. Um, my revising is so reading aloud is huge, and then seeing what I didn't put on the page. Like I think it's all on the page, and then other people read it, and they say, "Oh, is this what you meant?" And I realize, "Oh no, that's not it at all." And I need to clarify and clarify until I get what's on the page closer to what I was planning in my head. Yeah,
Yeah,
because my
and then
head,
and the young person who asked that question is on the right track because to even ask what
yes,
are revising tips means that you know revision is needed. And that's super important because there are as a teacher, I really see this a lot. I see young people who remind me of me at different ages where I didn't want to hear anything. I didn't want to
yeah,
hear that my you know what didn't stink, right? Or I wanted to hear that everything was perfect that I did. But the reality is that writing is like cooking, and you think it might taste great, but somebody else might taste your cooking and say, "Oh, it needs some salt, or it needs some sazon, or it needs some," right? So to revise means to invite other points of views to ask the question, what's wrong with this piece? How could
mhm.
this piece be better? And that just leads to growth.
Yeah, exactly. And you're right. The first step in that growth is knowing that revision is part of the process.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, I love it. Yes. All right. Well, let's hear from a second kiddo. This is Andre in
Andre.
ninth. Yes, from ninth grade, Oklahoma City, Oklahoma.
Can you
What's
tell
up?
us a scene from your book that was emotional for you to write?
Ooh.
Yeah, it figures that Andre would ask me about the emotionality of my scenes because I grew up with some Andres, and every Andre I knew was full of emotion and passion, but also left big emotional imprints on me. Plus, one of my favorite rappers, Andre 3000. Every lyric that he spits it is an emotional roller coaster. Um, you
Mm,
know, it's tough to write, and I want to talk about why it's tough, not through my point of view, but I want to invite the points of views of my family members, the people who see me going through my process as I write. And people can tell, my family members can tell. They're like, whoa, you're writing something emotionally triggering because your mood right now. You know what I'm saying? I be in it. I be in my feelings. Whenever I'm in my feelings in a scene, I'm in my feelings in real life. So yeah, a lot
yeah.
of scenes are emotional. But if I could, I'll pick something from each book. Secret Saturdays, what was an emotional scene? Go to the Gray House scene where both boys trespass into the abandoned factory and they get to the 14th floor. What happens on the 14th floor was really tough for me to write because that happened. If we want to talk about tight, you want to get emotional. Go to page 87, the train surfing scene. But you can't tell my mother that I did that, right? Because she doesn't know that I did that. Actually, she knows that I did that. And then if you want to get emotional with what lane, how much time do we have left, right? There's so many parts that are emotional in there, but one of the scenes that's really emotional to me is the cookie scene in the supermarket. And that cookie scene, someone Facebook messaged me and said, wait a minute, Colin in Black and White must have read the cookie scene because they did an ice cream scene that matches your cookie scene. So Colin Kaepernick, if your team, read what lane, let me know that y'all read what lane.
Oh, and you said you're living through the emotions that are in the scene, but you're living through them as you're writing. Is that right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. There was a study that was done by different universities and colleges on how music changes the biochemistry of the listener. So if you listen to a sad song, you're not only replaying in your mind the sad moment that matches that sad song, but you're reliving it. And I believe that reading and media has the same effect as music. When people read a scene, you are in that scene. And if you're writing that scene, you're in that scene. So yeah, my books, they're not just books, they're tours through the hearts and minds of young people and their families.
Mhm. Yeah, they really are. Yeah,
Thank you.
that's true. Facts.
Facts. I hear that probably 100 times in one school day. Whenever something is said that's truth, kids say facts.
Facts. Okay, well, let's hear from one more kiddo. This is Lisette from 7th grade in Massachusetts. And her question is a verbal one here. I'll read her question.
Okay.
What is your perspective on the world of today?
Oh wow, there's so much going on
Yeah.
with the world today. My perspective on the world today probably could be found in my books. Uh, the the current world, 2021, that we're living in, could be found in what lane? Beth Palmer, she's a librarian out in Columbus, Ohio. She said right as the pandemic was starting, she was reading What Lane with a group of fifth graders. And
Wow.
an Asian girl had said, this book is a right now book because her Asian dad had gone to the supermarket and he was harassed. And, his bullies were saying, Asian people started the pandemic and he should go back to his country. And so the girl said that when she read What Lane, she felt like this is the world that we're living in right now. And the librarian, Beth Palmer, said she wishes that she could take the pain that young people are experiencing today away, but because she can't take the pain away, she feels really grateful to have What Lane because it's helping young people to cope and to process and make sense of the world that we're living in right now.
Mm. Yeah, that's amazing. And so the book is actually it's not just teaching, but it's comforting, and it's saying, I'm here with you in it, in this moment that's so hard. Wow.
It's funny you say that because What Lane, when we hear that term, stay in your lane,
Right.
so many young, when I was right before What Lane came out, I was talking to a group. This is funny because I was aware it happened. I can't even believe that it happened. I was invited to speak at Yankee Stadium.
Oh, wow.
And so I'm speaking at Yankee Stadium to principals and school leaders from across the Bronx. And I started talking about What Lane and how What Lane was coming out. And I started by asking them, I said, raise your hand if you ever heard Stay in Your Lane. And one superintendent raises her hand and says, matter of fact, we were talking about that term yesterday in a staff meeting. stay in your lane, right? But when people tell you to stay in your lane, the question is, what lane? What lane are you supposed to stay in? So also, but when we think about what lane, it's lanes. It's about driving to places. It's about where you're going. And I was really hoping that what lane would be like a manual, a guidebook. So I really appreciate you, Rebecca, for saying that you feel like it's something that you walk with, because I want young people to walk with that book and let it guide them and steer them to where they want to be, but also to get rid of the people who are trying to sideline you and get you into accidents. Just put your ride or dies, put your homies who really are going to help you get to where you want to be in your ride.
Yeah, and that is part of his journey in that book, is to learn who to trust and who is a real friend and who is messing with him, really,
Right.
and who's manipulating or trying to use him. And that's a tough thing to know. Like, who's being real with me? Who can I trust? And even adults, who can I
Yeah.
can I trust them to be fair to me, or am I going to have to be on guard in some way to navigate, my trip through the store or whatever?
Yeah. Well, that's one of the reasons why I put Miles Morales in the book. I feel like Miles Morales, being half African American and half Puerto Rican, being the same mix of my family, was the hero that I needed when I was in middle school. But also, I put Miles Morales in the book, What Lane, because he has spider senses. His spider senses are tingling. And the reality is that all of us on the planet, we have spider senses. We have our intuition. We have our gut. And that's a superpower. And it helps us figure out who's real and who's fake. So I encourage, young people to really, and everybody, just to really listen to your spider sense when they're tingling, and follow what your intuition is telling you. But it's hard to do because, like Oprah said, it speaks to you in whispers. It doesn't shout at you. It doesn't yell at you, yo, that dude is fake. But it kind of tells you, like, what's up with that? Why did he do that?
Yeah, just quietly. And your books, they do more than whisper to help students see the world as you paint it, like a little glimpse of your own world, your own autobiography. But they also show them a lot of hope and a lot of smart ways to make it through and be inspired. And I love that, because you have that gritty, real, like, I'm being real with you, but then you also have, and there's hope, and you have potential, and you need to, be your best self, and shine, because that's in there too.
Yeah. When you said that my books do more than whisper, I heard that will.i.am and Britney Spears song, I want to scream and shout and let it all out. And it's true, because when I was a middle school student going through what Stephen and What Lane was going through, I wanted to scream and shout and let it all out. And I didn't know how, I didn't have the vocabulary to say the things that I wanted to say. It took me a lifetime because to figure out how to say it. And so What Lane is the result of a lifetime of figuring out how to say it, but in a way where young people could relate to it and feel like, oh, this is cool to read. I was at this one school and the school, the young person was like, took his sneaker off and wanted me to sign his sneaker. And I was like, wow, you're elevating authors to the level of celebrities. Like, you want me to sign your sneaker? I can't sign your sneaker because your parents are gonna get at me. They're gonna be upset with me. But the kid felt like the book was something that was fun but yet educating at the same time. And that's what I wanted to be, because when I was young and I was experiencing racism and my eyes were opening to the things that Stephen is starting to see, people were giving me books that were written by adults. They were giving me these heavy books that, like we said, they were like the teachers who were all facts. and all robotic. And these
Yeah.
books were just too heavy. And some of them were thick, like cinder blocks and pillows. And I was like, yo, these books are going to put me to sleep. I need something that feels like a comic book. And so that's what I tried to do with Wet Lane. I tried to make it fun, but actually informative.
Yeah. Wow. Well, I have to say this has been so interesting and fun and important. So thank you so much for being here with the Latinx Book Fest. And
Thank you for having me.
yeah, you're so
I
welcome.
saw the lineup of people who are going to be a part of the Latinx Book Fest, and I was like, whoa! I'm super lucky to be on the lineup.
Oh, well, we're super lucky to have you, and I'm excited for the whole lineup. And this has been such a treat. Yeah, thank you, Torrey, and thank all of our audience for attending Books as Teachers, Building Empathy, Connection, and Imagination here at the Latinx Kidlit Book Festival. Bye, y'all.
Bye.